It's a while since I've put any practice on Patreon, which is a bit remiss of me. This particular practice is the use of the imagination to overcome some kind of resistance. Now, in many traditions, resistance is seen as something to be overcome. It isn't always. I imagine you resist as well as I do, putting your hand in a fire every day. So we're not deliberately using these techniques to try and, how can I put it, deliberately experience pain. But there are things in life that we have to do. So I'll give you an example. I need to go and sort out something to do with the post here. The post in Portugal is a nightmare. You wouldn't believe that a country could make post so complicated. We live on a lane. It's a steep hill, and it's a cobbled hill as well. So the postman on his motorbike won't go up the hill. So I have to go and sort out a whole pile of stuff to put a post box at the bottom of the hill. Do I want to do this? No, I don't. I have lots of resistance to doing that. So I first heard this of this exercise 30, 40 years ago, and I use it now and then. It's not a regular thing. I only use it when there's something I need to do where there's resistance. I'll give you a few more examples in a moment. So the exercise itself is very simple. So say, I'll give you the example of me having to sort out this post thing. It means going down to the post office. It means finding some work guy to put the post box at the end of the lane. It means waiting around for an hour or two to catch the postman and telling him that this is our new post box, blah blah blah. So what we do is we imagine doing those things. The very things that you don't want to do, you imagine doing them as vividly as you can. And go through the details. So for me, waiting in the car, probably. For the postman to arrive, I'll go past the end of the lane and trying to catch him. And then in pidgin Portuguese, trying to explain to him what I want. And all of that. So we imagine it fairly in a fair amount of detail. And then there's a strange thing happens. As we imagine this, so the resistance to it starts to disappear. Why does it start to disappear? Well, because we are effectively going through the pain. We're deliberately going through the pain before the event. There's only so much pain associated with waiting for the postman for an hour and a half. And if I imagine that, then the resistance to it kind of diminishes. The first I heard of this, well, there were two occasions. One person was explaining to someone that he hated gardening. And there was no suggestion that he should like gardening. It was just he needed to mow the lawn. It was going wild. And so it's suggested to him that the night before, he plans to do it, to imagine mowing the lawn in some detail. And it worked for him. He didn't pretend he was enjoying mowing the lawn, that it was there was some merit in mowing the lawn, that it would lead him to some kind of salvation. He just mowed the fucking lawn. And there was less resistance to doing that when he came around to doing it, because he'd already ploughed through some of the resistance by imagining the event. And there's another important point here. Someone was talking about having to make a phone call. I might have mentioned this before actually, but it's a very important point. He was saying, well, I needed to make this phone call, and I needed to make it because it was important. It was to do with my divorce. He was getting divorced at the time. And I just couldn't, these his words, or he just couldn't find it within him to make the phone call. And he said, such a little thing, such huge resistance. And the answer that came back was very wise. If there's huge resistance, it's not a little thing. Even if it's something that we might consider to be trivial, like just picking up the phone and making a phone call, or maybe pulling out a weed that you walk past in your path every time you walk up and down the garden path or whatever, but you just can't bring yourself to do it. So the thing here is not to look for huge, massive events, such as, well, I need to go and train for 4 years to become an actuary or a lawyer or something, but I don't really want to do it. Well, that's not the magnitude of the thing we're looking for. We're just looking for small things where there's a huge amount of resistance. Of course, if you go into why there's resistance, and this is another step, although I'm not recommending it at this point, the guy didn't want to make the phone call to the lawyer because actually he didn't want to get divorced. It was his wife who wanted to get divorced. And so all the resistance to this seemingly trivial act had a whole pile of baggage associated with it, which was, all the emotional hurt and all the rest of it, of having to carry on with this divorce when he didn't want to. So, just to summarize that, pick something. For me, it's dealing with the postman. Something that you don't want to do, something relatively trivial, and just imagine it. And of course, there will be resistance to imagining it. Propositions 12 and 13 in part 3 will allow you to understand it more. The mind does not want to think of things that diminish its power. I could go into why dealing with the postman diminishes my power, but I'll spare you that. So, propositions 12 and 13 will maybe elaborate a little bit for you the significance of this exercise. And the fact that entertaining in the mind something that is painful, because clearly we avoid these trivial things because in some way they're painful, how entertaining those things in the mind breaks down the resistance to them. Anyway, do that when you notice there's some resistance, some trivial kind of task that you need to do.